right, we'll get things rolling here this morning. This is good to do this. One, because man, the energy level went up big time in this Sunday school class. But it's good for some of you that's normally in here to kind of look around and see, okay, what's going on in the rest of the church. So these are our Sunday school classes combined. And we have a men in action class that goes on with our young men. Then we have our ladies. I don't think we've named our ladies class, so the girls meet. With Tiffany and Zach Stouffer teaches our young men. And then Jeremy and I teach our class over in the high school wing. And then Pastor Johnny has his class there in the auditorium or in the gym. And then you guys here in the auditorium that are normally here. So we're all together today. And so I'm excited about our Sunday school session this morning as David comes up and introduces himself and Molly and just kind of how the Lord's brought him here. It's never easy to do something like this, and they're just pulling in. Poor guy, I mean, they pull into town, we move him in. He's got to coach a volleyball tournament, and then we make him do this the day after. But I will say this, congratulations on winning the volleyball tournament yesterday. So any of our young ladies who played yesterday, you'll probably have to stand the next service too, but go ahead and stand for me. You played yesterday, and all right, good. So congratulations. These guys, I can't believe they can stand, honestly. We left here at 6 a.m., and the last game was over at 6:30 p.m. They had a long day of volleyball, but both teams won the championship, junior varsity and varsity, and we had a great time down there, and it's always good to win. So anyway, they've come in. We told them just take a couple weeks off and relax, and it didn't happen. And so what position are David and Molly filling? You know, somebody corrected me the other day when I said intern, and I corrected David when he said intern. When we have interns, you know, you think about somebody that doesn't really know kind of what they're doing. You know, you do an internship in college in the summertime so you can learn. Okay, these guys are not necessarily at an intern status. And really, when we set this program up, we called it the Faith Fellowship Program. And being here and around the hospital and being in the hospital as much as I am, I see a lot of fellows, whether at Cleveland or at WVU. And those fellows have had the training, okay, they've had the time put in, and now they're getting real doctor experience. They might not get a real doctor check, but they get a real doctor experience as they learn. And so that's what we established. So our first one was Joey, and Joey came in as our first faith fellow, was here 3 years, and did what we want him to do. He's going off to Indiana now and a youth pastor there. And so David and Molly now are two, and I'll let him tell the story about how they ended up here. And so they're fulfilling that fellowship program, and they'll be with us as long as the Lord wants them to in that, 2 or 3 years probably, and we'll go from there. So Molly's going to be teaching for us. That wasn't part of the deal, but ministry is ministry, Molly. I need you. I'm sorry. So at least this year, Molly's going to be teaching our 6th grade class for us, and David's going to be doing health, Bible, and phys ed, as well as coaching volleyball and following Johnny, Jeremy, and I around and learning all aspects of ministry. So we're going to keep him busy as they learn and just figure out, okay, this is the aspects of ministry that I like. This is what I want to specialize in. And then obviously I watch, okay, these are the areas I see you gifted in and that God has given you, and this is what we want to develop for you with the future. So they are here with that fellowship program. So they've got 30 minutes. So David, you come and share with us.
Well, awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. We are excited to be here. Honestly, I'm just excited that I was able to get out of bed today. We got back to our apartment. For those of you who don't know, we moved into the apartments right back here in Ashworth Landing. So super far away, really inconvenient location. But we got back last night around 10:15 p.m. and just absolutely crashed. The whole ride back, though, I was like, man, I am exhausted right now. And I didn't even have to actually play volleyball. I was just on the sideline cheering, coaching, screaming my head off, which is why you might hear a good bit of vocal fry in my voice. So I apologize for that. I have been sucking on cough drops, chugging water as the best I can to try and help that. So if I cough or get choked up a little bit halfway through, it's the volleyball. I'm not getting emotional, I promise. I'm going to hold it together. When Pastor Jeremy, Pastor Treg, they mentioned that they wanted me to do this combined Sunday school, I thought, oh great, the first time I have to speak in front of the church and speak in front of everyone at Faith is one of the hardest scenarios for me to speak in. I really don't love having to talk about myself. When I get on church stages, pulpits, it's really easy to open God's Word and talk about all that God has done for us, talk about the Bible, because that's why we're all here today. It's a higher authority, so it's really easy for me to confidently get up here and talk about that. But when they were like, yeah, just get up and just talk about yourself for 30 minutes, it's like, wow, okay. So I was telling some of the teen guys a few minutes ago, this is also a stretch for me because every time I've had to give a testimony, the famous words, they'll stand up and tell us very quickly, very briefly, 5 minutes about yourself. So this week, in the midst of preparing for the tournament, getting our apartment set up, I've tried to jot down some notes on how I kind of want to go through this. So we'll talk about how God brought us here. I'll mention kind of our background. I'll talk about my salvation testimony as well. But just kind of my story, our story of how God has step by step brought us to this point in our life today. I am obviously going to talk about, this is my wife, Molly. Molly, wave everybody. I won't make you stand out, but I think most of you have met Molly. I'm not going to tell all of her story, because that's her story. I'm not going to speak entirely for her, but the parts that I'm involved in, I might have to elaborate on just a little bit more. But kind of starting from the very beginning, I guess you could say, I grew up in North Carolina. So I was born and raised in the South, and I loved growing up in North Carolina. It's a great place. I grew up in Winston-Salem. So it's about 5.5 hours southeast of here. And I would have told you it's the perfect place to live because you're about 3.5 hours from the mountains and you're about 4 hours from the coast. So in a day, you can do pretty much anything that you want to. And I loved growing up there. I have 2 younger brothers. Their names are Andrew and Stephen. My parents, they read the Bible and they thought those were some great names to go with. And my parents decided to homeschool us. So I'll get into the Christian education side of it a little bit more, but that is what our parents decided to do to raise us. Now, many of you know that Molly and I, as of 2 weeks ago, we used to work for Pensacola Christian College as college representatives. And I absolutely love Christian college, partly because that's where I spent 7 years of my life, 4 years as a student and then 3 years on staff. But going beyond that, I am myself a byproduct of Christian college. My parents, they met at a Christian college in Indiana, and that greatly influenced my life. Now, Molly, she grew up in New Hampshire. So when you're a Southerner, and you bring home a girl from New Hampshire, you have a lot of explaining to do. Now, when I went up north, when I went to her home, you have a lot of explaining to do. Really wasn't a big deal. Really, no. Now, when I went up North Carolina, up in New Hampshire, their state motto is literally "live free or die." So they do not care what you do as long as you leave them alone. And it is, and Molly's church definitely adheres to that state motto. So when I was up there, they're like, oh, cool, he seems like a pretty okay guy. But when Molly came down south and came to my church, they're like, wow, okay, a Yankee, I guess that's all right. But very, very quickly, Molly kind of won them over. So I grew up in a very Christian home. I grew up in church. That was the Bible. Jesus was at the center of really everything that we did as a family. Now, my parents, the reason that they decided to homeschool me and my brothers is for a long time, they didn't think they were going to be able to have children. They were married for 5 years before they finally found out that they were going to have a kid, have me. And so when that time came, my mom was like, I didn't think I'd ever have kids. So she wanted to take the opportunity to soak up as much time as she could. So growing up, we never, I know some of our homeschool friends, they kind of looked down on other forms of education. That's not at all why our family decided to do that. Education is a great decision that each family gets to make for themselves and for their situation. And God blessed my dad with a job that allowed mom to stay home and homeschool all of us. So all growing up, we pretty much used the Abeka curriculum all the way through, which I know is a lot of the curriculum that's used here at Morgantown Christian and has been used by a lot of other families, other schools as a form of education as well. And our parents always taught us to love God, to have a relationship with Him, and to obey Him no matter what. Those were like the three big things that our parents really tried to ingrain into us as we were growing up, both of us in very different situations in some ways. So I mentioned I only have two younger brothers. Molly is one of 7 kids. So the holidays at our houses are two very, very different things. I'm the oldest. We obviously do not have any children yet. My two brothers, they're not married or anything like that. So holidays at our house are very quiet. At Molly's house, it is very loud. There are a bunch of nieces and nephews running around. So it was great to go to PCC to meet someone who was raised with a very similar worldview, very similar biblical philosophy. Yet had a different home life like that, and that was awesome to get to know her more throughout college and see how much I had to learn. My experience at church I realize now was pretty unique. When I grew up at one church, really all from about 3 months old up until pretty much I left for college. I was at one church. And I really had no idea how that experience of only going to one church really shaped how I viewed church, how I viewed the body of Christ. I grew up at a very large church. On a Sunday morning, we would have about 3,000 people, and I thought that was totally normal. If you've ever gone to a larger church like that, you know that in some ways, there is a lot of good. You can do a lot more outreach. There's a lot more hands to get involved in different types of ministries. And in many ways, it's a blessing. But with that blessing of size, there's also a lot of negatives. There's a lot of takeaways from that. And to me, that's just how I thought it operated. So growing up, I had a lot of opportunities to get involved and plugged in different areas. One opportunity that greatly influenced me as a teenager was because our church was kind of old and well established. We actually had purchased some land up in Virginia, in Hillsville, Virginia. So we actually had a Christian camp, a small one that we would run. And so as a teenager, when I was 13, 14 years old, my youth pastor came to me and asked me if I wanted to work on staff at that Christian camp. And I thought that was cool. I thought it'd be a lot of fun, get to hang out with a bunch of teenagers, play sports, enjoy the pool, all of that. I thought, hey, this is a great opportunity. I don't have to find some other job. I wouldn't have to work in the fast food industry in the summer. I thought this is perfect. I had no idea, though, that I would learn so much about serving working at that Christian camp. I was exposed to a lot of great preaching and met a lot of different types of Christians. That influence, that experience really helped to grow me. And really, I look back on those 4 summers with a lot of fond memories. And it truly shaped me and grew me. Now, early on when I was a kid, I had made a profession of salvation. I think it was around 5 or 6 years old. But, you know, when you're raised in a Christian home like that, sometimes it can be easy to not feel the need to grow because you weren't saved out of this horrible life of sin. You don't have that type of testimony, which is not to diminish that at all. But for me, when I made a profession at a young age, I never really grew because I didn't really think that I had to. Well, there was a youth conference at our church, and an evangelist came through, and he said some things that really made me doubt my salvation. So when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I really had to go through this battle of, was I saved, was I really not? Because I had remembered making a profession of faith, but I had not grown So from 5 years old really till I was about 13. I had done all of the right things. I obviously went to church. I was getting involved. I worked a summer at our Christian camp. I was doing a lot of the right outward practices that I knew was good for a Christian to do, but internally I knew that things were not right in my life, and I really, really had to battle it, and that was something that I realize now that I think a lot of people who are raised in church, they have to go through if they have not seen fruit in their life. So when I was 13 or 14, I really had to surrender. I had to get things out of my life. I had to, really, really have faith in what the Bible tells us about. I was so thankful for Pastor's message last week on the grace of God and how that alone, through that grace, through God's grace, that is how we are saved. I had been putting my faith in a lot of different things. I had been putting my faith in the wrong things. And so around the age of 13 or 14, I took care of that. I got that right and was able to move past that and started to grow as a Christian. Now, in my mind, I was flourishing. I was growing more than I ever had before. And so I thought, hey, this is great. I'm doing awesome. But very quickly began to peter out. I kind of fast forward through high school. I was quickly approaching the age where I had to answer the question that every high schooler dreads to have to answer. I was starting to get asked, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Now, those of you who are about to start your senior year, you're probably so excited to finally be on the cusp of graduation, but you're also dreading having to answer that question or dreading having to think about that. Now, like most teenage guys, I just put it off. I was like, okay, I don't really want to worry about this. I don't really want to think about this right now. I'm going to continue putting it off. Well, thankfully, my mom, she's an awesome lady. She's the type of lady, though, that would not let me put off things like that. So one day, I came home, and she started asking me these really weird questions. She's like, David, would you someday want to maybe be a coach? I thought, yeah, sure, that sounds interesting. She said, would you want to be an athletic director, maybe a personal trainer? Would you want to get involved in camp ministry? And she started listing off all of these things that were things at the time that really, really interested me. And after I pretty much said yes to all of those, she said, had you heard of this sport management degree that's offered at Pensacola Christian College? I was like, no, I hadn't honestly thought about that. Now, Johnny, don't get any ideas. I have no desire to be an athletic director anymore. My parents took me down to college days at PCC. I prayed about it and had absolute peace that is where God wanted me to go. And after 4 years of learning what an athletic director does, yeah, no more desire to do that anymore. Johnny is doing a great job at that, and we're going to continue to let him do that the best that he can. Now, when I went to PCC, I had prayed about it. I talked to my parents about it. I'd done my best to seek godly counsel, but ultimately, I really didn't go there with the right motivations. I thought it looked like a great place. Those of you who went down this summer for Teen Extreme, you can have a lot of fun on the campus of PCC. And hey, that is what I saw. I saw that I could have a good time. I saw that I could have fun, not go into debt, and I could be in a Christian environment. So I could have that peace of knowing that, hey, I was in the center of God's will. So my first 2 years at PCC, all I really focused on was having fun. I went to class and I did the pretty much the minimum effort that I needed to get by. In those first 2 years, I met a lot of people. I had a lot of fun, went to the beach a lot, and it was great. Summer of right before my junior year, looking back, that summer was a big, big turning point in my life. That summer, so after sophomore year, for various reasons, a lot of my friend group was not going back to college. Some of them were just dropping out. Some of them didn't appreciate the Christian college environment. Some of them were transferring to other schools. It was all for various reasons. But 5 or 6 of my close friends were just not coming back. Those of you who are in high school right now, if you thought about all of your close friends dropping out, going back to school, that'd be a pretty discouraging thing, having to feel like you have to start over. That's where I felt like I was at. I was like, man, I'm about to be an upperclassman finally, and here I am having to start over making new friends. That summer, I had the opportunity to work at a golf course. I worked on the landscaping crew there, which is a fancy way of saying I weed-eated fence lines, I raked sand traps, and when they really, really needed help, they would let me push mow around the country club. So that summer, I had a lot of time to think while I was sitting on a lawnmower for hours and hours on end. And throughout that summer, God began to work on my heart and really convicted me that I was doing maybe the right things, but for the totally wrong reason. My motivations were wrong. I wasn't giving everything to God. I was doing it all for myself. And that summer, I had had enough of it. I was like, all right, God, I know that you've called me to PCC. I know that is where you want me and what you want me to be doing. So I want to give it all back to you. So I committed that when I go back, that for my third year at PCC, I was going to go all in. I was going to get involved in everything that I could and make the most of it. So I go back, and I would say I had been on the campus maybe 2 days, and I met someone new, actually. This girl from New Hampshire introduced herself to me. Actually, it's a really long backstory that I'm not going to go into right now. But let's just say, if you haven't picked up on it, I'm a pretty sarcastic person, just a little bit. And I was sarcastic to Molly, and she threw it right back at me. And I was like, she's the one. This is it. This is perfect. And so slowly over time, it's a really long story that I'm not going to get into right now. We became really close friends, and then a little bit more than friends, and a little bit more, and then here we are, basically. She laughs because that's a drastic oversimplification of the process, but again, I don't really feel like going into it right now. I did think about going into it and making fun of Pastor for him telling his stories last week. I did have to chuckle when you were talking about your mom's stamp of approval. So you picked up on it. I come from a family of just boys, so my mom, she didn't have to raise any daughters or anything like that. So all growing up, my mom said, no one's going to be good enough for my sons. All of that over and over and over again. She met Molly and very quickly was like, David, I don't know if you're good enough for her. She's pretty nice. And in the short time we've been married, I'm already joking with Molly that when we go to see my family, it's way more about how's Molly doing? What does she need when she's at our house? They don't really care about me anymore. And so that I had to chuckle because that was a pretty big stamp of approval in my mind when I started to see that happening. As I finished out my college career, I had surrendered to give God my time at college to make the most of it. He slowly began to change my desires. When I went to PCC, I said I was going to study sport management so that when I graduated, I would be able to open up a gym and, just pretty much work out for a living. It would be surrounded by other people who enjoy working out. And if you had asked me, well, how is that God's will? I would have told you that I would be able to witness one-on-one to people while we were personal training. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That is a great way to minister to people, but I knew that was me cramming God into my plan. It wasn't giving my desires to him and then letting him do whatever he wanted with them. That was me trying to make the most of what I wanted. So after that summer, that turning point in my life, I started to realize that, man, I don't know if that's what God wants me to do with this. And so I gave it back to him. I got the opportunity to work a summer at Teen Extreme right before my senior year. And that is when I really, really started to grow as a Christian. And so my senior year, I was looking at what to do next. What am I going to do with that next step after college graduation? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? I started talking to friends, to teachers, and along the way, someone told me about this job at PCC where you'd get to travel, you get to meet a lot of people, you get a lot of speaking experience, and it was all paid for. And I thought, that sounds pretty nice to me. My wife and I, we weren't engaged yet. We were serious, but we hadn't gotten to that phase in our relationship. And so I thought, this sounded like an awesome opportunity. So I lined up an interview to be a college representative. And the interview went great. The whole time I was sitting there, I was hitting it off with the director of promotions. In my mind, I'm like, I am a shoo-in. This is great. We get to the end of the interview, and he's like, David, I think you're a good fit for this position. I think you do a good job. However, we don't have any spots available for you. And I'm like, we just went through a 45-minute interview. Why would you have me here if you knew there were no spots for me to fill? So I was pretty frustrated. However, he gave me the advice. He said, if you feel like God's called you to PCC, if you believe in what we're doing as an organization, if you believe in the cause of influencing Christians to go on and make a difference wherever God's called them, then stick around for a little bit, and if something opens up, I'll give you a call. So I prayed about it, had peace about staying. I got plugged into the admissions department. So it's funny to see now how I wanted to be able to help students get to PCC to grow the same way I did. God still allowed me to do that, just in a different way. Instead of doing it in chapels face-to-face, I was getting to do it from behind a computer, on the telephone, through text, through email, all those different ways, and still able to help students along the process. Now, I'm so thankful that God sees the big picture. I'm so thankful for his sovereignty, because I didn't know, obviously, none of us knew that COVID was going to happen. And so COVID happens. Molly is sent home early. All the students are sent home early. And I was still there, able to stay at PCC. We still had a good job. Thanks to God's goodness and his blessing, PCC did not have to let anyone go or anything like that. I was able to keep growing, keep saving money for a ring and all of those things, and was finally able to get that call. The director of promotions, he called me and he was like, hey, do you still want to travel for the school? And I thought, yes. Now the first 8 months I got to travel by myself. August of 2020, there was like 3 weeks of training where they were like, these are the facts you need to know about PCC. This is how you present yourself. This is how you talk to people. And then after those 3 weeks of training on campus, we were sent out for 2 weeks called training tour. And that's where you're sent out with a veteran representative. And during those 2 weeks, they sent us to West Virginia, of all places. And we went to this church that was having this really weird Wednesday night outdoor fellowship. And we met this pastor. I think he'd lost his hair or something like that. And long story short, Pastor Spicer invested in me and Billy, the other rep who was with us. We got to play some disc golf. And kind of Faith Baptist Church and Morgantown Christian Academy really stood out to us. We went to a lot of ministry in those 2 weeks. But this church, what you guys have here, the community, the family-oriented mindset that you guys have, and ultimately just loving people the way Jesus would, really stood out to us. So a couple weeks, or maybe even a month or so after that, I don't know if you remember this. I was coming back through the area, and so I remembered the church, and I was like, well, I need somewhere to go Sunday morning. So I slipped in kind of late at the last minute. As soon as the service was over, Pastor Spicer came back to me and was like, dude, why didn't you tell me you were coming? Let's grab coffee afterward, and went the extra mile to invest in me. As a representative, hopping around all that often, it kind of became funny to us to see pastors who were excited that they would have visitors. They'd run up to us. They'd be like, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? And then to find out that we were representatives and we're going to be leaving in 30 minutes, just to see the disappointment in their face. Like, oh, they're leaving. They're not worth our time. It kind of became funny after a while. But this church was different. Our pastor is different, and that really stood out to us. So when he asked us to pray about the opportunity to come work here at Faith, to work at Morgantown Christian, that was something we took seriously, because church ministry was really not at the forefront of our minds. I knew I wanted to get involved in a ministry. That's why I loved PCC. Even though it may be a business or an educational institution, they serve a higher purpose. They follow after a higher calling to push people closer to Jesus. And I loved that. I loved being able to work a job that ultimately was fulfilling that higher calling. But we didn't think church ministry was the right fit for us until we were exposed to more churches. I told you I grew up in a very large church. Well, through Proclaim, if you guys were here about a month ago, you remember the singing group that was here. Molly and I were able to travel with the team for 2 summers ourselves. The first summer we did it, we traveled up in the New England area, kind of Virginia all the way up to Maine. Went to about 60 different churches. Church up in New England is very different than other parts of the country, and really, really opened our mind to how God can give us all the same book, we can all read the Bible, we can follow the same commandments, follow the same principles, and how there's still so much variety amongst believers. And we loved that. And so we began to pray a little more, began to seek God's will. It was funny. Molly and I, we had a moment on the road where we were like, we are anxious to do what's next, but God has called us to be PCC representatives for this season of life. So we're like, if God's called us to this, let's give him everything while we're out here on the road. It was about a week after that when Pastor Spicer asked us to pray or told us about this opportunity. We started praying about coming here. And once other churches found out we were praying to go into church ministry, we started getting a lot more offers. We had a church in Maryland offer us a very similar position. Once PCC found out we were praying about leaving, they started offering us positions. And it was like, man, God really tested our faith over the last year to just kind of wait and see what he would do. And it was funny because those offers would suddenly fall off the table. Pastors would stop reaching out to us. But this opportunity, it was always there for us. We always had such peace about coming here and being a part of this family, being a part of this church. And now that we're here, we're so excited to see what God's going to do now. Our vision our goal is to come alongside you as a church, to come alongside you as families, as people, and to just help reach out to people and point them to Jesus. That's really it. Pastor joked about Molly teaching, which is not exactly what she expected to do while she was in college, but we know that's where God has us now. We know that he's given us so many wonderful opportunities here to influence people, to reach out to people, and we're excited to do that. A few weeks ago, we were in a church service, and the pastor there was talking about influencing people, and he was talking specifically about teenagers. And he drew this triangle on the whiteboard. He drew a circle in the middle. He's like, this represents a young person, and at the top of the triangle, he wrote God. He said God should be what's reigning supreme in our life. But the other two corners, he wrote church and parents. He said these are the three big influences in a young person's life. And that's a good way to think of it. That's not a bad thing. But the way that I prefer to think about influence in that way is to picture it more like a ladder. Each one of us, whether we're young or old, no matter what stage of life we're in, we are all on our own ladder. And some of those rungs are positive influences in our life, and some of them are negative influences. The positive influences are encouraging us to go higher, to climb closer to God, to be more holy, to continue pursuing after what God has asked us to be, to conform to his image. But there are some rungs on that ladder that are wanting us to climb lower, to fall off the ladder, to grow closer to what the devil, to what the world wants us to be. While Molly and I are here, as we join the family here at Faith, we want to be two more rungs on each person's ladder that we get to influence, but we want to be positive influences. So whether that's coaching volleyball, whether it's helping out on Wednesday nights, whatever it may be, I hope that you know that we're going to do our best to go all in. We don't really care about what the method may be, but that's the goal. That is why we're here. And so over the next 2-3 years, whatever God has in store, we are so excited to hopefully accomplish that mission. And I just want to give a word of encouragement to you guys, that you guys have been so welcoming to us, that as a church, you guys are doing exactly what you're supposed to. I don't know how many times people have been like, hey, as soon as you get settled, you're coming over to our house, we're having a meal, we're going out. We're excited to cash in on a few of those, just so you know. So we haven't forgotten. I'm just kidding. But keep it up. Whether it's new people joining staff, new college students, whoever it is that's coming in, show them the same right hand of fellowship, however you want to call it, to them. And you guys are going to be doing exactly what God has called us to do. So that's pretty much all I had. Pastor, if you want to come and say whatever you want to say, we look forward to seeing you guys in the next service.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, it's just what we needed around here was another sarcastic person. But I can sympathize with his mother greatly. After they talked to us and left, I told a couple people, I'm not hiring David, I'm hiring Molly. He just comes along with the package. But we are very, very excited to have them, a special young couple to say the least. And that's why they're here. They're here to make an impact. It's one thing for, one day for me to say, I come on staff, but it's another thing when 4 of my own are going to be the 4 who will receive the greatest impact from their ministry, and that's my children. And I'm excited about having them here to help make that impact on our kids. And they're just going to be great to have around, and we're excited for it. So where is David located? We pretty much almost got his office done. One thing he didn't mention that I will in his testimony: the summer between his freshman and sophomore year of college, he rode his bike from San Diego to St. Augustine, Florida. This guy is a cyclist. So in his office, we're going to hang it this week. He's got the jersey that was awarded to him for the ride from, remind me? The Southern Tier. So he's got a Southern Tier jersey where he rode the Southern Tier across the United States. And so it's quite an accomplishment, to say the least, with that. Some of you rode the trail a couple miles and was done. But he went across the United States. So his office is right here across from the nursery. We have a counseling center on this side, and then his office is right there. Johnny's across the hall. So if you just want to wander around with a cup of coffee, go back there, check it out. We just got to hang some stuff up on the walls, and it's done. Is there anything in your fridge yet? No, okay, nothing in the fridge, so don't open the fridge. It's nothing there yet, teens. What's that? Donations welcome. All right. He'll be gone the next couple of days. They're going to meet Molly's family in Lancaster, and they're going to go to Sight and Sound and do some things there, and get the stuff from their wedding, right? And bring it back, so all their wedding gifts with that as well. And so if you do want to stock his little fridge while they're gone, that's fine. If you want to slip them a little gas money before they go, that's fine as well, as they're there. So guys, thank you. That was wonderful. We praise the Lord that God brought you our way. We looked at some pictures when he was first here, and I think Cade was only about this big. So time goes quick, but we're glad they're back and staying here. And I do remember that. We went to Starbucks down at the hotel, if you remember, and had Starbucks down there Sunday night. All right, you are dismissed. If you haven't had a service yet, this was not it. You got to stick around. And if you already have, you can go.